everyone. I'm Margo Orlando Littell. I live in Maplewood, and I just published my second novel. It's called it's called The Distance from 4 Points, and it was published by the University of New Orleans Press, and it just came out on May 28th. The Distance from 4 Points is set in southwestern Pennsylvania, which is a part of the world where I grew up, and it's about a woman named Robin Bescher. She is an affluent suburbanite who lives outside of Pittsburgh, who is forced to return to her Appalachian hometown of 4 Points when she discovers that her late husband blew their savings on decrepit rental properties there. So back in 4 Points for the first time in 2 decades, she and her daughter Haley set out to renovate the properties as quickly as possible before anyone reveals Robin's secret past as a teenage prostitute. Disaster strikes when Haley befriends a troubled teen mother who is squatting in one of Robin's most squalid properties, and Robin must reshape her idea of home or risk repeating her most regrettable mistakes. So that is what the book is about. Like I said, it's set in southwestern Pennsylvania, the same part of the world as my first novel, Vagabond By Name. And it was based on a fictionalized version of my own hometown. Really is rooted in some of the history of my hometown, which used to be a very wealthy coal and coke town. Of course, the fortunes of this town have fallen egregiously, and a lot of the homes where the wealthy coal and coke barons once lived are still there. Even though the town is very poverty-stricken now and, struggling economically as so many Rust Belt towns do, a lot of the former glory is still visible in these old grand homes. So these are homes that had all the characteristics of grandeur. There's woodwork and stained glass and wraparound porches, ornate brick and stonework, turrets in many cases, absolutely stunning pieces of property, and they have just fallen into complete ruin. Many of them have been split into triplexes and have been rented out for decades. Most have been neglected to the point of falling over, and they're very troubling to see because there are so many beautiful details that are still visible and still in existence, but they are also actively crumbling. And so whenever I would visit my hometown, I would drive through the main street and I would see these houses, and they were so beautiful and haunted looking, and I knew I wanted to write a story about something that takes place in one of these homes. And then the wheels start turning. So what happens to someone who has been away for a long time and who comes back to a place like this and who maybe had an experience in one of these grand homes and has occasion to return to this house and revisit her own past self? So that's really what sparked the story, were these grand pieces of property, and then it just went from there. So lots of trial and error along the way, but a house is at the heart of The Distance from 4 Points, and it's a house that really exists in my hometown. That's really what sparked the story. And so I sensed that there were some characters that wanted to call that place home, and I wanted to write about them. My hometown. My parents still live there. I have a lot of family and friends there, and so I visit quite often every year. And I find it a really inspiring place, not only because of the ruin of these homes, like I mentioned before, but also there's just so much natural beauty there. My town is right along the Youghiogheny River, in the foothills of the Laurel Mountains. So it's part of Appalachia, northern Appalachia, and it's just such a beautiful place. And so there's always this really strange dichotomy between the absolutely stunning natural beauty and some of the economic devastation that you can see on the streets of the town. I find the stories there to be very inspiring to me. I've always set my work there, even though I've lived all over the world, on both coasts, many cities. I always find myself writing about southwestern Pennsylvania, and I think it's because I know the people there so well. I know their struggles and their communities and their support systems, and I like exploring their questions and their struggles in my fiction. I hope my fondness for the place always comes through in what I write, and because I have a deep, abiding fondness for this town. things I did when I was researching this novel, which deals primarily about small town landlords and small town rental properties, is that I went back to my hometown and I had a realtor take me around to see some properties that were for sale. And I was really interested in seeing the most decrepit properties that were available at the time, so I could really get a sense, more than just looking at pictures on Craigslist and Zillow. I really wanted to get a sense of what these places felt like and looked like and smelled like. And those tactile impressions I really needed. And as I went around, these places were worse than I could have imagined. In a couple of instances, a door fell into the room when the realtor went to unlock it, just fell completely off its hinges. They were, in many places, the floor was unsafe to step on. The copper wiring and piping had all been stripped. These were places they had really been ravaged. But there was one house that really captured my imagination. It was actually the house that became the house on Whistle Stop Road in my novel. And it had a tunnel in the basement and a beautiful turret, although the peak of the turret had been missing for many, many years. And it had so much soul, even though it had been split into a triplex and completely abandoned. And a couple of months later, a friend of mine wound up buying this house and invited me to partner with her on flipping it, which we did over the course of a couple of years with the intent to beautify it and find a new family. And we did that, and we pulled it back from the brink and made it beautiful again, saved all the historical details that we could. Photos went viral on Facebook. 1 million people viewed them. Thousands and thousands of people from all over the world shared and commented. And then we failed to sell the house. People in that area were not interested in a giant, newly renovated home. And so we ended up taking in tenants and renting it out. And so I became a landlord, just like the protagonist of my novel. And so all of that happened concurrently with the writing of this book. It was a really strange blend of fact and fiction, and reality and fiction. And I don't think I could have written the novel in the same way had I not had those landlording experiences on my own. One of the most interesting parts of writing a novel, when you're with the story and the characters for so many months and years. I was with this novel for beginning to end, probably about 7 years. And I think what happens is that you become so fond of your characters, even the ones who are supposed to be the bad guys. It's impossible to write anybody as a true villain. I started off in this novel with the landlords in this small town being slumlords, and they were, neglecting properties and not taking care of their tenants in the right way that you would want. But over time, I became so empathetic to what the landlords themselves often went through. And part of that was, of course, my own landlording experience. So I think at the end of the day, to write a truly effective novel, you really have to embrace all of your characters. And in The Distance from 4 Points, I was able to do that, even though there are some who have a moral code that I would never abide by. By spending so much time with them, I gain a certain level of understanding, and that comes through on the page. So there's no one-dimensional character, I don't think, in any novel, really. In this one, there are some that started out that way, and then sort of over time, they took on nuance. One of the authors that I truly love is Elizabeth Strout. I love her Lucy Barton novels, and I love her Olive Kitteridge novels. I like that she explores places and families in depth, often across multiple works. She really digs deep into certain areas of the world and into different characters and all the people in the community that they encounter. I also really love Kent Harrah for the same reason. He writes almost exclusively about a small town called Holt, Colorado. And although his novels are not necessarily linked, they are all rooted in the same place and often involve the same characters, especially the Plainsong trilogy. The second novel of that trilogy, Eventide, is one of my very favorite novels. So I grew up reading a lot of short stories by Ann Beatty and Ray Carver, which I always really loved. But most recently, it's the novels that explore a community that I find really inspiring and influential to my own writing. A writer, the primary reason I think is that so many people are such active and enthusiastic readers. It's always easy to find people to talk about books with, It's always exciting to see how excited people are when they find out you have a book coming out. So it's a place that really appreciates the art and the craft of writing, and it's a really supportive place to be. I also really like being a writer here because, I mean, there's just space to breathe, space to move around. I'm a writer who really needs a room of her own to be creative in and to sort of escape from my family life. And, you know, in a place like Maplewood, most houses you're lucky enough to have a little extra space that you can grab for a writing area. And so I find that room to be very inspiring. I've written in other kinds of places, but I really like feeling that generosity of space. Publishing during a pandemic is a very interesting experience. I did not get to have an in-person launch or have book readings in, you know, libraries and bookstores in the way I had hoped with this novel. But what's really come out of it is a lot of writerly community and a lot of opportunities to reach new readers through virtual events and videos like this one, which may not have happened or have been inspired without the pandemic, sort of forcing people to investigate new writers in a way they hadn't before. So there are some positives that go along with all the challenges of publishing during this time.